Well, your expertise is really in the whole area of the history of church as well. What about the church fathers? Is this controversy new, or has it existed for thousands of years?
I would say, in general, not inside the healthy Orthodox wing of the church, but there were people who were of heretical view trying to take over the church, like the Gnostics, who resented material reality, and so they wanted to spiritualize everything. And they would certainly not have taken seriously the first few chapters of Genesis in the interest of their theology, which came from the East. So the church fathers are often addressing them and saying, no, there's one God who made the entire world and not a plurality of gods, and he spoke these worlds into existence. So as a general rule, wherever you see creation addressed, the Gnostics are wrong to say that God didn't make it or it's unimportant. No, God created material reality. He loves it. He redeems it. It is essential to know creation in order to appreciate who Jesus Christ is, what he did. And so it goes. Now, a little bit later, by the 4th century, then you have people writing on creation itself. Usually the name of the book would be Hexameron, namely, Work of 6 Days. And you had Basil the Great in the 4th century, one of the Cappadocian fathers, wrote a marvelous Hexameron, going through the work of the 6 days and surprisingly dealing with some of the very issues that we face since that time. And then you had the great Ambrose of Milan, who was so influential in the life of St. Augustine of Hippo. He preached through creation, and it's very close to what we would say today.
From a perspective that these were literal 6 days.
These are literal historical truths, and that they're essential to appreciate redemption and make some sense of it. And so it goes all through the ages. St. Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages, Peter Lombard before that, Calvin, Luther.
Well, I know that St. Augustine is often pointed to by those who would try to allegorize Genesis. How do you read Augustine?
Let me say I love and appreciate St. Augustine and use his teaching regularly. However, he has one major peculiarity, and that is, he says, he believes that God created everything in one split moment of time, rather than taking 6 actual days. But there is a 6-day structure of different things happening, and he doesn't deny that. And he believes that was in order to accommodate the angels and angelic knowledge. And so he's not entirely successful there, because I think he's trying to work together two essentially incompatible systems, namely some theories of Neoplatonism and straight Hebraic teaching on physical reality.
Well, as we move forward in time then from Augustine, where do you see all of a sudden the thought beginning to work its way in that there is something less than a historical record found in Genesis?
Dr. Nigel Cameron, who did a book a number of years ago, which unfortunately is out of print, Evolution and the Authority of the Bible, in which he shows that the whole church, as far as commentators and creeds on into Protestant confessions, held straight 6-day creation until the European Enlightenment. And particularly two things happened, well, many things happened in the European Enlightenment, two things particular reference to creation. One is there was the introduction of the thought of vast geological ages evidenced by geological structures. That was happening largely in the 18th century, late 18th century. And then in the 19th century, of course, we have Charles Darwin. It was not that theories of evolution were totally novel. They weren't, because if you go back to certain of the pre-Socratic philosophers, Democritus, Leucippus, and others, they held some kind of evolution, but the Christianity had purged that out and said it's ridiculous and it goes way underground. It's able to come back to the surface by the European Enlightenment. Geology first, and then with particularly Darwin. I mean, his grandfather was teaching, Erasmus Darwin, but Charles Darwin's major work came out in 1859, and it sold out in about 2 days because people were so desperate to find an intellectual alternative to divine creation. Well, Cameron shows that when about 5 or 6 years after Darwin's book became popular, i.e. by the late 1860s, there was scarcely a Protestant commentary that didn't accept some form of evolution, or at least say, this is a matter best left to the scientists, let's deal with the spiritual.
It happened that fast.
It happened that fast within 6 or 7 years. Now, there were exceptions. Good Bishop Wilberforce resisted it, but that's how quickly it happened.
So is that the point as we now move forward from the 1860s to our present day, that we then have that continued belief in evangelical Christianity that leans more and more towards the notion that Genesis is not history?
Yes, I heard a distinguished professor from Holland when I was studying at University of Edinburgh, Huikas. He said, if we take this is literally what he said, if we take a stand on a literal interpretation of Genesis, as do Morris and Whitcomb, it is very likely to make the gospel incredible to intellectuals and particularly to young people. If we say that the evolutionary scene is to be challenged on a scientific basis, we will lose respect for the gospel of salvation, so we cannot do it. That was his answer. And I think, I mean, he's a good man. I don't agree with his point of view. But I think he would be speaking for the vast majority of those who feel you have to be a theistic evolutionist or you will make the gospel incredible to our culture, which has for whatever 150 years accepted some form of evolution.
But what you're saying is that that position is not the historical position of Christianity. It's more recent.
Yes, it is. It is post, I can't give an exact year, post 1750s, post 1760s. It's that recent.
Right. But especially post-Darwin in the 1860s.
Particularly post-Darwin. It was a major collapse of Christian intellectuals before it. Nearly the whole church collapsed. Particularly the conservative theologians, you know, Shedd and very great men like Warfield and others felt that you would be so out of line with what their colleagues in various universities thought was proper scientific procedure that they had to make some kind of common cause with it, although they remained Christian. So the church did not fight Darwin. Bishop Wilberforce did, and one could name 2 or 3 others, but hundreds gave in immediately. The church did not mount a resistance. The only resistance is beginning to come since the 1960s with Whitcomb and Morris, and now it's picking up tempo, which may be why some of the recent organizations to push theistic evolution have felt it necessary to rise up, because they see us as a threat to what they think is the acceptability of the gospel in the culture. I do not put a bad motivation onto these people. That I refuse to do. I just think they're mistaken in how they assess. And most of all, here's the issue. You and I will stand before God. We must not answer whether something was pragmatically helpful, but whether or not it was true.